Good afternoon, everybody. It just turned 12 o'clock, which makes it correct for me to say afternoon. This is Beth Herman with the Department of Public Instruction, and we're so glad that you are able to join us for our third in our evidence-based practices for SEL webinar series. I'm very excited today to bring you some information about Positive Action, another evidence-based program in a great cadre of programs from which you may choose. If you've joined these before, you might be aware of the process for doing this, but let me just give you a few housekeeping bits of information. So in a moment, I'm going to turn this over to our consultant from Positive Action, who's going to do the webinar for you. But if you have questions as they're coming up, please put them in the chat box. I will monitor them, and I will ask the questions when there's a logical pause to do so. And then we will also take some questions at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to do that. At the end of the webinar, I haven't put everybody on mute, but if you want to actually ask a question rather than put it in the chat box when we get to the question and answer section, please feel free to do that. This webinar is being recorded. Once we get it back from being closed captioned, which is required before we post it, it will be on the website on the alignment webpage, very next to where Positive Action's alignment tools are located. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Jay Allen from Positive Action, and he will introduce himself and then begin the webinar. So thanks. It's over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. My name is Jay Allen, and I'm very happy to spend a brief time with you this afternoon. And I'm grateful that you're willing to take the time to learn about Positive Action and, of course, social and emotional learning. Positive Action is a program for empowering greatness in individuals, schools, families, and communities around the world. And we're going to talk about how we empower greatness today. But let me begin by giving you some key elements of Positive Action, a little framing for you. Positive Action is designed to align with social and emotional competencies in Wisconsin and around the world. It's aligned to Common Core standards academically. It uses data-driven assessment tools. It is a whole child approach. It is trauma-informed. It's designed to develop and support a safe, engaging, and inclusive environment. It is designed to create higher order thinking. It engages with restorative practices and is designed to connect the school, the family, the community to the child. Now, I won't go through this eye test. This is just to show that Positive Action aligns with the Wisconsin State social and emotional competencies for pre-K through 5 and 6 through 12. And you can get a copy of this and this alignment, if you'd like, by talking to the consultant whose email address I'll have for you at the end of this presentation. This is just to establish, yes, we align with your Wisconsin State standards. So when I talk about empowering greatness, how do we do that? How do we accomplish that? Well, we do it with knowledge and with skills and with the climate you create in your schools. Positive Action is a system of interlocking components. There are 5 layers of components in Positive Action, which I'm about to go through in some detail, so don't be distressed if this is complicated. Probably the best way to understand it is that these 5 layers interact and interlock to unlock the potential of your students. The knowledge and skills of Positive Action are taught in 6 units. I don't know what it is about education, but you love your units. So there are 6 units in Positive Action. Unit 1 provides a conceptual foundation, the philosophy, and everything you need to know to get started. And units 2 through 6 include specific positive actions for the whole self, for the development of that child. So let's talk about these 6 units and the skills that Positive Action delivers. Unit 1 includes the philosophy, the think, act, feel circle, and a lot of skills around self-concept. The philosophy of Positive Action is very straightforward. You feel good about yourself when you do positive actions, and there is a positive way to do everything. Since you work in education, you probably believe that. This undergirds everything we do in positive action. It's designed to build within students this understanding that they are going to feel good about themselves when they do positive actions, and that there's a positive way to do everything. They can make better choices. We believe that philosophy is intuitive. It doesn't really matter whether you've heard of positive action or you're familiar with positive action. You're always going to feel good when you do the right thing. But by making that concept conscious, you change the decision-making process so that students can make decisions intentionally, recognizing that they're going to feel good and be guided by those good feelings. Now, the philosophy is very nice, but I don't know if you're aware of this, not all students listen to you. And because not every student is auditorily attuned, and not all of them are good listeners, sometimes it's helpful to show them. So we have a way of depicting that philosophy using what we call the think, act, feel circle, which simply says you have thoughts that lead to your actions, and your actions lead to feelings about yourself, and your feelings about yourself lead to more thoughts. And that becomes the pattern of your life. And that circle can be positive or negative. If you're having positive thoughts and doing positive actions, you're going to feel good about yourself. And that is a positive pattern to be stuck in. But if you're having negative thoughts and doing negative actions, you're probably going to feel badly about yourself. This theme, this think, act, feel circle appears throughout positive action, and is a way to give a student insight into their own behavior. Because if you ask a student, why did you do that? They're liable to say, oh. And you can tell them what you did came from a thought. It began inside you, and it has consequences in how you feel about yourself. And when you give that student that insight into where their behavior comes from, they are more likely to be able to control that behavior. Now, there's a lot of talk in education about motivation. And there are two basic flavors of motivation. Extrinsic motivation, where the reward is something given to us externally. For example, you're sitting in a webinar, you're probably getting paid to do that. We all expect to be paid. We believe in extrinsic motivation. Another extrinsic motivation would be grades. We give grades to students. But there's a better kind of motivation that is intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is the reward of the good feeling we get when we do the right thing. Positive action is designed to build intrinsic motivation because there are limits to extrinsic motivation. As I frequently talk to educators, I'll explain to them that you can probably get a kindergartner to do just about anything for a Tootsie Roll, like once. And the next day you'll ask them to do the same thing again for a Tootsie Roll, and they'll be like, no, Tootsie Rolls are nasty. I need something better. They will want a better reward. And eventually you can get students acculturated so that when you ask them to do something, they say, what do you give me? They expect to be rewarded. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is always there. That good feeling is always there, whether they're in school, at home, or on the streets. And if you can teach them, if you can build in them that understanding of intrinsic motivation, that's very powerful. Let me give you a concrete example of this. Many schools, and you may have schools that have extrinsic motivations built into the school. You have a token economy. You may be a PBIS school. And you may have, as I travel around, the Mustang dollars and Bulldog bucks and good citizenship stickers. There are all kinds of extrinsic rewards. But I can tell you how to change an extrinsic reward, one of those token economy items, into an intrinsic motivation. It's a very simple idea. Let's choose an example of you are assigned to lunchroom duty, and you're standing there in the lunchroom and you're watching all the kids coming and going. The students are running around hollering. You're keeping a lid on it as an adult authority figure. You're standing there trying to look engaged. And then you see a particular student walk into the cafeteria, and let's say his name is Drew. And when Drew walks in, you tense up a little bit because problems tend to follow Drew. Not that you have any students in your school like that, but when Drew walks in, you tense up because there could be drama when Drew shows up, and you're watching him move through the lunchroom like a shark swimming through a reef, and you're wondering what's going to happen. And as Drew is moving through the lunchroom, just as Jesus comes out of the lunchroom line, he drops his tray right in front of Drew, and that could be a worst case scenario. That could go very badly, so all your adult neurons fire up and you're ready to intervene. But then you see Drew do something nice. You see Drew bend down, he helps Jesus pick up his tray, and he says, "Oh, look, your hamburger's nasty. Tell the lunchroom lady, she'll give you another one." And Jesus is like, "Ah." And so Drew says, "Could you get him another hamburger?" And thank you. And he gets Jesus another hamburger and then sits him down. And you saw Drew do something nice, which you were unprepared for. And then you realize that's why you have your extrinsic rewards, your Feinstein fins or your bulldog bucks. So normally what you might do is go up to Drew and say, "Drew, I saw you help Jesus with your tray. Here are some bulldog bucks or Mustang dollars or Eagle bucks," or whatever the reward is. You might use your rewards that way, right? Every teacher would recognize that. There's a better way to do that, and I can change that forever for you. Same scenario, you're in the lunchroom, you see Drew walk in, you tense up a little bit, you see Jesus drop his tray, then you see Drew help Jesus with the tray, and your heart warms, and you think, "That's so sweet," and you go over and you walk up to Drew, same scenario, and you say, "Drew, I saw you help Jesus with the tray, but here's what's different." You say, "Drew, I saw you help Jesus with that tray. How'd that make you feel inside?" And Drew says, "I don't know, good, I guess." And you say, "Here are some Eagle bucks to remind you of that good feeling." And you transferred the meaning from the extrinsic reward to the feeling. What if somebody did that for Drew every day? What if we were continuously catching Drew doing the right thing and saying, "How did that make you feel?" Every time we do that, Drew gets a little more mature, a little more insightful, a little more mindful of what's going on. And that's how you change an extrinsic motivation into an intrinsic motivation, which is what positive action is designed to do. Now, in the positive action philosophy, there are two parts. The first part is you feel good about yourself when you do positive actions. And the second part is there is a positive way to do everything. That is the optimistic, the hopeful, the resilient way to be. It's always better to be positive than negative. But to be honest, your students don't control their circumstances most of the time. They can't control everything, but they can control how they react. One of the challenges in education is that students come from a wide variety of backgrounds, family situations, cognitive abilities, social and emotional frameworks. And we don't know what those students face when they go home every night. And some of them face very difficult things. Because of that, every student needs to be told that there's a positive way to do everything. You can choose to be different. You don't have to react the same way everyone around you reacts. You can be different. You can choose a positive way, because that is the essence of resilience, isn't it? To choose the better way, to choose to persevere, to overcome. So it's essential that every child knows that they're going to feel good about themselves when they do positive actions. And there is a positive way to do everything, no matter how difficult their life might be right now. So that is what Unit 1 is about self-concept and learning where their behavior comes from and how to moderate that. This is a list of 52 skills. We call them the skills for greatness. These are the skills that positive action teaches in the other 5 units of positive action. So let's talk about those other 5 units. Unit 2 contains positive actions for a healthy body and mind. Physical positive actions like exercising, keeping clean, eating right, taking care of your teeth, avoiding illnesses, avoiding harmful substances, refusing to abuse, getting enough sleep and rest. Intellectual positive actions like problem solving, decision making, being motivated to learn, having good thinking skills, study habits, valuing learning. What you should understand about positive action is that these are the same skills we teach pre-K through 12. They're just taught developmentally appropriately at every grade level. So in the second grade, when there's a lesson about keeping clean, there may be a washcloth and a bar of soap and a song about scrubbing, because second graders will sing for you. But in the 5th grade, when you're teaching about keeping clean, the lesson might be more like, y'all need to start putting on deodorant. Seriously, you should have started last year. It will be developmentally appropriate for the children at that point. So that's what Unit 2 is always going to be about. Unit 3 is about self-management, managing yourself responsibly, managing your thoughts, your actions, your feelings of anger and worry and jealousy and anger and pride and anger and fear and anger and loneliness and anger and all the other feelings they get besides anger. And managing your time, your energy, your money, your possessions, your talents. When we teach this at the younger grades, we talk about, there are lessons about getting gifts, the gift of feelings, the gift of money, the gift of possessions. Everybody has something they're responsible for. As they get older, these gifts become resources. I was at a high school in Massachusetts recently, and the teacher was telling me about a student who said, I don't need this is little kid crap. And the teacher said, it's funny you say that, because these are the skills I use every day to keep my job. This is the reason I drive a car to school and you ride the bus. And the kid was like, oh, that was harsh. But there is no point at which we do not need to manage ourselves. We always need to get up, brush our teeth, show up on time, take care of our stuff, manage our feelings. We just teach this in that developmentally appropriate way. Unit 4 is about social skills, getting along with others, treating others the way you want to be treated, seeing the good in others, respecting others, saying nice things to others, showing appreciation, empathy, fairness, kindness, cooperation, avoiding bullying. Very frequently when I show up at a school, they're like, this is it. This is the skill set we need. We'll just take this. And I have to point out that the foundation of getting along with others is treating others the way you want to be treated. And it is not necessarily safe to assume that every child knows that they deserve to be treated well. And that's why positive action begins in Unit 1, talking about who they are, their self-concept, and how they view themselves. So that by the time we get to Unit 4, they know they deserve to be treated well. And they respond appropriately to this concept. Unit 5 is about self-honesty, being honest with yourself and others, being in touch with reality, telling yourself the truth, telling others the truth, not blaming others, not making excuses, not rationalizing, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, doing what you say you're going to do. And of course, there are lessons around each of these points. I was at a school in Florida, and I had 63rd grade boys sitting on the lunchroom floor. And I asked them a very simple question. I said, how many of y'all are going to play in the NBA when you grow up? And how many hands do you think went up? Every hand went up. Every third grade boy was planning on playing in the NBA. Is that being in touch with reality? Maybe not. But certainly the way to handle that is not to say, you'll never play in the NBA. No, you don't want to crush their dreams. The way you get them in touch with reality is you give them a better reality. Every child who walks into your school already knows what's wrong with them. There is always somebody ready to tell you what's wrong with you. What they may not know is what's right with them. If you fill them up with their strengths, their weaknesses become less and less important. We have what we call the normative decline in behavior, which happens starting around 10 years old, where they come into kindergarten and they're very sweet and they get more and more competent through the second and third grade. And then by fifth grade, sometimes fourth grade, they begin to become more difficult. It's because they become self-conscious of their weaknesses and they front to cover those weaknesses. The kids that don't become nasty are the kids that know what their strengths are. And positive action is designed to build those strengths. That's what Unit 5 is always about. And Unit 6 is about self-improvement, improving yourself continually, setting physical goals, intellectual goals, social and emotional goals, believing in your potential, having the courage to try, turning problems into opportunities, persisting, broadening your horizons. This is essentially resilience, and resilience is often what determines who lives and who dies, because they have to have a future. I don't know if you know this, but if you grow up in a crazy house, your house gets very small. Your world gets very small. Your world is not any bigger than your mother's addiction or your brother's incarceration or your sister's problems. And so their world shrinks down. And the challenge of education, the gift of education, is to expand that world. And what positive action does explicitly is try and get them to look up and see past the problems today, to see how big the world is and how great their place in it could be, and move them past today, to broaden horizons. That's what Unit 6 is always about. So those 6 units of positive action, those skills we've just been talking about, those 6 units, are delivered through a set of tools. These are the components you would use to teach positive action: the classroom kits, pre-K through 12, the bullying prevention supplement, drug education supplements, family kits, community kits, climate kits, counselors kits. There are all kinds of tools, which I will tell you about. The elementary toolkits, starting at pre-K, pre-K has 130 5-minute lessons. They're 5 minutes, of course, because they are 4. So pre-K is a good place to start with very simple lessons. At the K through 6 level, there are 140 15-minute lessons. Why are there 140 lessons? Because there are about 180 days in a standard school year, and when you take out testing days and field days and assembly days and all the things that interfere with education, you wind up with about 140 days where you could reasonably expect to deliver content. So that's about enough for a lesson every day of a school year. That's the theory. 15 minutes every day. You've got that much content. We'll talk more about the flexibility of the program a little later. There are enough materials in the box at every grade level for 30 students. And they may include puppets and games and poems and role plays and stories and stickers and music and posters. Just for example, first grade. In the first grade box, you'll have an instructor's manual, you'll have a variety of manipulatives, you'll have activity sheets, and you'll have posters. Here's a sample lesson from the first grade, lesson 45 on thinking and choosing. And it tells you right up front what the purpose of the lesson is: to introduce the concept of choice in using positive and negative actions. Then it tells you the materials you need: a board, chalk, marker, maybe internet access to play a song. And then it tells you the materials that are provided in the box. This is important to understand because no positive action lesson is going to say, you need to provide 60 tennis balls and a blonde wig, or 37 mousetraps. Generally, the materials needed will be things you would already find in the classroom. And most of what you need is in the box. It is self-contained. And then it gives you the procedure for the lesson, where it says teacher, that means do this. Write the word choice on the board. Then it'll say this. So the format, the procedure for the lesson is do this, say this. Do this, say this. It is very prescripted and scripted so that you can present a lesson with minimal prep time. Now, you don't have to say exactly what it says. That's not required for fidelity. You need to cover the concepts of the lesson. But it does make it easy for busy teachers to come in and present a lesson with minimal preparation. Looking at the 5th grade, same basic structure. It's going to have a manual, manipulatives, activity sheets, posters appropriate for 5th graders. The lesson is structured the same way. Right up front, it tells you the purpose. It tells you the materials you needed, which in this case are paper and pencils, crayons and markers. And it tells you what materials are provided in the box, that activity sheet you see there. Then it gives you the procedure of do this and say this. At the middle school, the lessons are designed to be a little longer, 15 to 20 minutes. They're interactive and scripted. At grade 6, you have units 1 through 6, 140 lessons, as I said earlier. But grades 7 and 8 are special. At every level, pre-K through 12 in positive action, they teach all 6 units except for the 7th and 8th grade, because it's the 7th and 8th grade. So in the 7th grade, we have units 1 through 3, 82 lessons. Again, they're a little longer. And in the 8th grade, you get units 4 through 6, 82 lessons. There are still enough materials for 30 students every box, and there are still different strategies for engagement, posters and games and manipulatives and stories and radio scripts. This is the 8th grade kit with the instructor's manual, the manipulatives, student activity booklets, and posters appropriate for the 8th grade. One thing I should say that is characteristic of the 7th and 8th grade, which is somewhat unique, is that they have these radio plays, scripts, which can be done as podcasts or any way you frame them. And what I have discovered, having done this for a few years now, and I will frequently go back to schools multiple times, what I find is that the students really like the plays. When I ask the teachers what they like most in middle school, it's doing those plays because everybody wants to be a star. And students with weaker reading skills, your lower level readers, they can still do it. It's not written in such a way that it's going to be too sophisticated for them, but you could give them the script ahead of time and let them prepare and give them parts that require a little less reading. So everyone can participate. In the 8th grade, the lessons are still structured so that it tells you up front what the purpose of the lesson is, tells you what materials you need to provide and what materials are in the box. And then it gives you the procedure of say this, do this, say this, do this. And this shows the radio scripts, the student journal, and an activity sheet that go with this particular lesson. High school is more sophisticated. There are 132 15 to 20 minute lessons, but the high school kits are not divided by grade level, they're divided by theme. So that Kit 1 is the most general, life's big question, who am I? Kit 2 contains the play Lives on the Line. In other words, the whole school year is built around producing this play as a radio play, as a video, or whatever way they want to produce it. But the play becomes the linking, it's a 44-act play, and it becomes the big linking theme of Kit 2 in high school. Kit 3 is project-based learning. Again, we're teaching the same skills you saw in all those units we looked at earlier, but in Kit 3 of high school, they're doing an art project, a community project, a service project, art community service. They're doing a collage, a mural. They're doing various projects that they work on together that reinforce these skills. In Kit 4 of high school, it is life training for teens, where they do peer mentoring or family simulation, basically preparing them for life beyond high school, but teaching the same set of skills. Again, enough materials in each kit for 30 students and a high level of engagement. This is what high school Kit 1 looks like. It's got the instructor's manual, the manipulatives, activity sheets, and posters. The lessons in high school come in sets of 3. There'll be a positive actions lesson, a positive feelings lesson, and a positive thoughts lesson. But the structure remains the same. Simple to do. Say this, do this. Here's an activity sheet. That is how the classroom kits are designed to work, to be simple so that you can use them, you can hand them to teachers and not have them be overwhelmed. In addition to the classroom kits, there are climate development toolkits. So in a school, the climate development kits are designed to link what's happening with positive action in the classroom to the school-wide climate. So at an elementary school, for example, you might have individual teachers teaching positive action every day in their class for 15 minutes, but then there might be words of the week read over the intercom. And there might be positive action posters in the hall and student assemblies where they talk about the positive actions that students are doing. And there's the ICU box, the ICU doing something positive, where students refer each other for doing positive things. It's a very simple concept, but it has a huge impact on the normative climate of a school, because you put a box in a classroom and you tell the students, okay, when you see someone do something positive, write it down, put it in the box. And kids will get into that, particularly at the elementary level. Well, I saw Barbara helping Nancy with her wheelchair, or Mr. Williams, the custodian, cleaned up when I threw up for like the 9th time this year, or Mrs. Jones stayed after and helped me with my homework. So once a week, the class opens up that box and they talk about all the positive things that happened in their class that week. And they may pick some of those positive things that happened to their class and send them down to the office. And maybe over the intercom, they announce some of the positive things that happened in the school that week. And that has the effect of giving students the impression that positive things are always happening in our school. This must be a great school. And if you don't do that, students don't naturally gravitate to positive things. They don't naturally talk about positive things that are happening in their school, because we know that positive things happen in every classroom, every day, in every school. Most of the time, students are doing what they're supposed to do and they're learning. By raising that to a level of consciousness and mindfulness in the school, you change the climate of the school. At the secondary level, same basic concept. There are materials designed to link the classrooms where positive action is being taught to the school-wide climate, using assemblies and a positive action leaders club and the Salute Our Students box, which functions essentially the same as the ICU doing something positive box. So these are the climate tools that you might use on a school-wide basis. There's a counselor's toolkit, which has 42 30-minute lessons, which are designed to reinforce the same principles that are being taught in the classroom, but for smaller groups. The counselor might do group work, or they might do individual supplemental work. Basically, your frequent flyers get reinforcement through the counselor's toolkit, which could be used by the school counselor, school social worker, school psychologist, someone with a different scope of licensing who is more focused on more specific and directed interventions. And then there are supplemental toolkits. There are drug education kits, bullying prevention kits, conflict resolution kit, that all use the same basic modalities and language as the rest of positive action to deal with specific directed outcomes in substance abuse prevention or bullying prevention. And there are parent and family toolkits. There's a family kit, which can be sent home with students, can be provided to families, where they have lessons, 42 lessons they could teach as a family. Now, the family kit is a great idea, but if you give 300 families family kits, the next day, many of those will be for sale on eBay, because not every family is committed to that level of interaction. And for that reason, positive action has family and parenting classes where we actually prepare families to teach those lessons. Basically, come in, coach them so that they can go home and have a positive interaction as a family. So there's 7 classes where you prepare them to go home and teach 7 lessons.
Can I interject with a question that came in?
Perfect timing.
How current are the lessons in the kits? When were they written?
They're updated continually. This program is 37 years old, so they have to be updated continually. And it varies. Generally, they are current and updated. When we find things, we fix them. And let me give you a specific example. I found a lesson a couple of years ago that was talking about being a big pop star like Diana Ross. And that's a little anachronistic. And so that became Beyonce or something more relevant. But a more current example, I had a teacher point out the other day, there was a lesson which mentioned music on CDs. And she said, I don't think any student of mine owns any CDs. That is now anachronistic, and that made me feel old. So I made a note. As the procedure goes, I send the note back to positive action headquarters and say, you know what, we may need to get rid of references to CDs. So the lessons are continually being updated. And if you ever do come across an anachronism, you need to let us know. That would be very helpful. So I had a teacher recently say, there was a reference, well, this wasn't recent, this was like 3 years ago. A teacher found a reference to a Walkman. And she said, I mentioned the Walkman and the kids didn't know what it was. And my thought was, well, why did you say Walkman? Because you knew they were going to know what it was. Does that help? And what is the next question?
Okay, had to unmute myself. The next question is, are family connections and activities included with the classroom kits, or are those separate?
Those are separate. Now, in the classroom kits, there are different opportunities for family engagement. So you may have a lesson where students are asked to think about the people that love them or take care of them, or to ask their parents or grandparents or their caregivers a question. But that is not a consistent theme in the classroom kits.
Okay.
Family components are separate.
Are pre and post evaluations or processes for that included in the kits?
No, but they are available, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. That is a great question.
Okay, and then a couple questions about cultural relevance. And is this a culturally sensitive and appropriate program?
Yes, and I get to deal with that a lot. And no, the program was written by a white lady in Idaho, but yes, it is used all over the world, and they generally find it to be culturally relevant and sensitive. And I'll talk a little more about that and cultural relevance. I don't generally talk about adaptation for this kind of presentation, but yes.
Okay.
But I have to say that teachers really provide that bridge. So, for example, there may be a lesson that talks about holidays. And it may have European holidays referenced. But when I work in Detroit, we don't talk about European holidays. Frequently, we talk about the Eids. We talk about Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha, or instead of Halloween, we talk about Dia de las Muertas. So teachers often bring that cultural relevance. But there's still going to be a reference to some kind of holiday, but you have to make that relevant for your students. Does that make sense?
Okay, a couple more. They're coming in here.
Keep them coming.
The intervention binders you mentioned, is that appropriate for special education populations?
It is. It is. And I'm going to talk about that when I talk about implementation strategies.
Okay.
Yes.
And then another one, then again, you may get to this. We have somebody who works, we have a deaf school here in Wisconsin. And you had mentioned like the radio cast. Is this program adaptable so that it can be accessible to deaf students, or video interactive, or closed captioned or subtitled, for example?
There are no components that are not essentially in writing. So we do have the program in use in hearing impaired populations, and they do the student plays. They just sign them instead of speaking them. And so yes, adaptation at that level is very easy.
Okay, thank you.
Very good, and we'll answer more questions. What I want to point out at this point is that the center of positive action is that philosophy. You feel good about yourself when you do positive actions, and there's a positive way to do everything, which is represented by that thoughts, actions, feelings circle, which is encompassed by the 4 developmental domains: intellectual, physical, social, and emotional, which are in turn encompassed by these 6 units where we're teaching specific skills. And we don't just say, you need to have empathy. We don't just tell students that. They're going to role play. They're going to feel empathy. They're going to experience empathy. And that is the power you have to get behavioral changes. So let me talk about training options for just a minute. Because there's training available, and we provide different options designed to meet the specific needs of every district and school. And they're generally highly rated trainings. That's mostly what I do, and I love going to places where I say, this was the best professional development I've ever been to. That's what we're going for. We do on-site training. The heart of our positive action training is a one-day orientation training for teachers to prepare them to implement the program. As you may know, not every teacher is equally committed to social and emotional learning. So one of the important things is to get buy-in, to help them to understand how easy it is to use, get them comfortable, and get them committed to actually doing the program. So that is kind of the text of the one-day orientation training. We also offer on-site mid-year and end-of-year refreshers where we do troubleshooting. Basically, that fits into the coaching model I'll talk about a little later. But we do have a lot of on-site training available to make sure that we succeed because the stakes are very high. We also offer web-based training like this. Live webinars where you can interact, ask questions, and recorded grade level trainings so that teachers can go out, and you've got a new first grade teacher, she can just come in and watch the first grade overview and how it fits and get a good idea of how that works. We also offer training of trainers. We have a 4-day comprehensive course where we will take district personnel that you've selected and get them fully prepared to come back and train in your district for years to come. Let's talk about implementation strategies. This is really where the rubber meets the road. At pre-K, generally the program is used 5 minutes a day, 4 days a week. But every school gets to decide how they're going to do that. But that is a typical implementation strategy. K through 5, typically 15 minutes, 4 days a week. They're possibly using the drug education or anti-bullying supplements on Friday or Tuesday or the 5th day of the week. And hold on to those questions because I'm going to, at the end of this slide, we'll talk in depth because this is just designed to explode the conversation on implementation. Grades 6 through 12, 15 to 20 minutes a day, frequently as part of homeroom. Sometimes they'll do it 30 to 45 minutes, 3 days a week as part of an advisory period, or 45 minutes, 2 days a week as part of the health curriculum. There's a lot of flexibility and a lot of different strategies schools use to get it in. And it basically depends on the structure of your school and where you can fit it into your day. And of course, as you asked earlier, identified needs populations in special education classrooms, behavioral classrooms, ISS. When we deal with developmental delays, as we frequently do in special education classrooms, you just pick the level of materials you think is most developmentally appropriate for the students you've got. Because we're teaching the same skills pre-K through 12, it really doesn't matter because they're all going to get the same skills, and you decide what will work best for your students. For the teacher, it's what takes the least adaptation to make it work. Now, let me just say, these are different implementation strategies, but we do have, what's the best way to say this? You may not have 15 minutes a day, 4 days a week in your classroom at the elementary level. You may say, we can do it 2 days a week. There are 140 lessons, but if, as a school, you decide that we can't do 140 lessons, we just don't have that much time, we think we can do it 2 days a week, and that would get us through, typically in a school year, 90 lessons. If you do that, we will give you a list of the 90 lessons you should teach. If you come to us and say, as a high school, we love it, we want to do it, but we just don't have that much time. We can't get to 132 lessons, but we think we can get to 50 lessons. We'll give you a list of the 50 lessons you could teach that will get you through the entire program through the year. Now, you'll leave out a lot, but you'll hit each of the major skills. So you've got that flexibility to come up with a plan that meets your precise needs for your school, your population, your classroom. Because Positive Action is such a robust program, we have 2,000 lessons pre-K through 12. There's a lot of flexibility you can use with that much content. So you're not stretching 10 lessons to last a year. You're picking the most important lessons and making sure students get those. Now, back to the questions you got.
Okay, one more came in about the cost. So the question was, what is the cost of the trainings for each option?
Oh, that was a great question. I was totally unprepared for that. And you know what? I don't actually know that because I go and do the training. I do have cost. I'm going to talk about the program cost in just a minute. But the training cost, it is some $1,000 a day. I just don't know how many. Sorry about that.
Okay.
That is the limit of my knowledge. You have plumbed the depth of my well, but I don't know. I do know the 4-day training is more expensive than the 1-day training. I know that's not very helpful, but it's logical. Questions about implementation?
None coming in yet, so you can just
Okay,
keep rolling
I'll
unless you're
just keep
at the
rolling.
point for questions.
Nope, I'm almost there. Coaching, we provide a variety of coaching models because we want you to succeed. We're not going to just give every teacher a 30-pound box and leave them on their own. Things like observations. We can come in and do on-site observations, or sometimes we have schools submit videos of teachers teaching the program, and then we can offer concrete feedback for teachers and coordinators on how they could improve the program, what they could do differently. We also do troubleshooting, a lot of, okay, what's working, what's not working, how do we deal with what's not working. We could do content or component specific webinar sessions and say, okay, we just want to talk about the family kit or the anti-bullying kit, or we're really having a problem in grade 5. What can we do with grade 5? And then there's peer coaching. We actually provide a professional development model where we give you a package that allows you to do structured peer-led professional development, where you build and reinforce your own best practices within your building among the teachers that are doing it. And that brings me to some outcome data, but you got another question, so this is
I do. So the question about the PowerPoint being posted, yes, we'll post it with the recorded webinar. And then, is this web-based instead of curriculum text-guided for teachers? So I guess the question is there an option for this to be web-based as opposed to text guide?
No, we are working on that, but right now it is a text guide. It is dead trees.
Okay. Is positive action similar to character education? And if so, why should we use positive action rather than character education?
Well, character education, of course, is a broad category. Character counts. There are different character programs. And I don't know why you should use positive action. No, wait. Positive action has been around for 37 years. It is the most researched program out there. In fact, let me just answer that question with this slide right here. Positive action has a broad variety of outcomes. I speak at national conferences all the time, and one of the things that gets a lot of attention is that you'll notice over here on the left the things that it improves academic outcomes, a 51% improvement in state math test scores, 20% improvement in state reading test scores in one of our tests, and I'll talk about this outcome data. But positive action generally gets better math and reading outcomes than math and reading programs. And we do that across the board, and I'll show you where that is validated. But it reduces problem behaviors like disciplinary referrals, suspensions, violence, bullying, alcohol and drug use. It improves pro-social outcomes, affiliation with good friends, honesty. It reduces aggressive problem solving, 81%. Negative moral center, 27%. It improves hygiene, 18%, which most teachers are very excited about. It improves sleep and healthy food and exercise, decreases unhealthy food and exercise. Students in one of the positive action studies in Chicago had a 23% lower unhealthy BMI. And it reduced depression 17% as measured by the BASC, which is the Basic Assessment System for Children, kind of the gold standard. So we get all these outcomes, and we do it across a broad demographic. Back to your cultural relevance question. This program in Hawaii goes into schools that are incredibly diverse, as you can see on the left, with a lot of different ethnicities represented. In Chicago, we were in schools that were 40% African American, 27% Hispanic, and the rest made up of everybody else. I spend all my time working in DC and Newark and Detroit and Chicago and Montgomery. And so I'm a long way from Idaho, when I'm doing this. I actually don't live in Idaho, but the program comes out of Idaho. So in terms of outcomes and diversity and cultural relevance, Positive Action has a proven track record, which I don't have time to get into a lot, except to say we have diverse outcomes. Now, these studies, all those outcomes come out of studies replicated and sustained over time, published in peer-reviewed journals like Prevention Science, Applied Developmental Science. There was a large randomized control trial in Chicago, a randomized control trial in Hawaii, published in the Journal of School Health and American Journal of Public Health, a randomized control trial in a southeastern state, a quasi-experimental design study in Nevada and Hawaii published in Prevention Science, and a long-term match control pair quasi-experimental design study in the American Journal of Health Behavior. And I only mention that because I know how much everybody listening loves long-term match control pair quasi-experimental design studies, right?
Well, so there's a couple questions.
Yes.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So what assessment tools were used to show the data? I think they're asking what sort of data collection tools were used in these studies, and then also how many schools and students does the data represent?
Best answered by saying all of these studies that are accessible are available through the Positive Action website, positiveaction.net. You can actually go out to these studies, the studies themselves, where they elaborate on the methodology, the instruments that were used, the time frame, like the randomized control trial study out of Chicago. I know that was, gosh, you're going to have to go look, but I know it was a 5-year study, and I think it was 10 of 1,200 across 20 schools. You're going to have to go look before I get myself in trouble. All of that is in the studies, published online, available for review, and there is a list of all the outcomes of Positive Action under accolades. If you go to positiveaction.net accolades, you'll go and see all these outcomes. You can click on any individual outcome, and it will take you to the study that came from. And from there, you can see the methodologies, the instruments, and how they derive those outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, because we have that, we're recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, What Works Clearinghouse. Positive Action is the top-rated program in the country for improving academics, behavior, and character. According to What Works Clearinghouse, we're evidence-based under ESSA, endorsed by the Council of Administrators of Special Education, CASEL, Blueprints, OJJDP, NREP, all those people that have money. That's why we're here. And to answer the question that was asked earlier, what about instruments? We provide a wide range of free measurement tools, fidelity monitors, outcome measures, pre and post test, behavior rating scales. We have like 100 different instruments on our website. If you go to positiveaction.net, you can actually look at those different instruments. Although now that I say that, I think they have taken most of them down. But if you talk to your consultant, they can hook you up. We do have a lot of different instruments, but it was a little crazy. We had so many instruments on the website. We said we need to narrow that down and make it simpler. And there are classroom and school observation tools as well. So we have pre and post tests ready to go that you can roll out tomorrow. Cost of the program. I don't know if you can read this. It's kind of an eye test, but most of the instructors' kits, classroom level kits, cost around $400, somewhere between $250 and $500, depending on the level and how much materials are in there. And then, as I mentioned, there are enough materials for 30 students. So the subsequent year, you don't need to buy the kit again. You just get all the worksheets and posters that were written on and all that stuff. You get a refresher kit. So that would cost $100 the second year. So it is much cheaper. Climate development kits, you can see how much they cost. But basically, you're looking at a program that costs $300 to $400 per classroom, typically. And materials are available in Spanish. You can see the family and parenting classes, climate development. And, here's the answer to your question about how much training costs. Online webinars are $550 for the first 2 hours. On-site training is $5,000 per day. And ongoing training workshops, $300. Not sure that if that's web-based or not. But yay, I got to answer a question I did not know the answer to. What we do know from Washington State Institute of Public Policy is that they did a big roundup of all the programs they had in their schools, not just the SEL programs, but every program they had in their schools. It is a long list. Go out to the WISP website and it's impressive. What they found was that Positive Action returned $32.36 in benefits for every dollar spent. And the way they calculated that was in post-school employment, social services provided, uh, law enforcement, all the things that Positive Action prevented. And they did this analysis for every program, let's be clear. And you can go out and look at the other programs you're considering on that list. And I can tell you right now, Positive Action is going to have a return on investment that is 4 or 5 or 6 times higher than any other program you are considering. So what we're trying to do with Positive Action is create a place where every student wants to be, where it's positive, it's safe, it's inclusive, it's involving, where positive actions are modeled and practiced and recognized and reinforced, where you're creating new experiences and you're contributing to the climate, not just in the classroom and the school, but in their homes and in the community. Our mission is to empower greatness. And with that, what are the other questions I haven't had a chance to answer?
Okay, so there are no more that have in the chat box yet, but we are within like 4 minutes of the end of the webinar. So I'm inviting you to put any more questions in the chat box. If you're able to unmute yourself and want to ask a question that way, feel free to do so.
I really wish I had more time to talk about cultural relevance and adaptation, but we have a limited amount of time. We're always happy to answer questions.
Any more questions?
And of course, there's Melody's name, number, email. She is the ultimate authority because she sits at a desk and answers questions for a living. Whereas I fly to Florida and talk to teachers.
So let me just also put out there that if you are interested in talking to educators that are using the program, please contact me. We will connect you with there are folks locally in Wisconsin using this, and I've worked with the Positive Action folks to create a contact list. So feel free to email me if you'd like. I'll put my email in here and I can help make that connection for you so that you can ask somebody using the program about their experiences.
I know you got at least 2 more questions.
Nothing's coming in.
Oh, okay.
So feel free to also use this contact information for Melody if you have other questions. And you also see that the positiveaction.net website is there where you can get some more details about the program. We will share this PowerPoint once we have the webinar closed captioned. Please give us a little time to do that. We have to send them out to a vendor to be closed captioned so that we can post them for accessibility for everyone. And we will follow up to take care of that. Let us know if you have any other questions. But thank you everybody for joining us. Final call.
Yes, thank you for the time. Thank you for the opportunity.
And we'll just do one final call for questions. All right, it sounds great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to do this and share with our Wisconsin educators about the program. And you all know who to ask questions. So we're here. Thanks very much. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.